Awesome. Sorry, we use Teams at work and projects, so Zoom is new to me. Awesome. I guess everyone knows me, so I'll skip the intro. So welcome to the first, I guess, first in a series of workshops that we've planned that are going to be organized, focused on policies and structures. I guess before we begin, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Sarah and Monica for all the work they've put in, not only into this workshop, but also like this whole initiative. I guess the idea behind this workshop was to help you think through the various steps and the various areas that an curling organization may need to focus while drafting a diversity, equity, and inclusion charter or statement for their organization. We wanted this workshop to be interactive, and I guess there'll be an opportunity for everyone to share their thoughts and ideas. We'll also try and break out into groups and do a few fun exercises before trying to come out with an outline for a DEI charter or a statement. So before we, I guess, dive into discussions, I wanted to quickly share and introduce you to a tool that is meant to help organizations assess where they are in their DEI journey and like to identify potential areas where they can focus their DEI work on. So this tool was originally developed by a nonprofit called the Maya Memorial Trust, and we are in the process of trying to customize this for curling organizations, and we'll hopefully share this as part of a toolkit for curling organizations. So the tool essentially identifies 5 distinct phases that an organization typically goes through in their DEI journey. The tool also identifies 12 different areas that are typically involved in DEI work, and also helps people evaluate where in that journey in each of those 12 dimensions or 12 areas their organization is in. As you know, like DEI work is pretty complex, and every organization's DEI journey is going to be unique. But once there is organizational and leadership buy-in, I think it's really important for each organization to capture their organization's position in terms of what they want to do in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion. Sorry, I'm trying to admit Leosh into the room. Yeah, so as I was saying, I think it's once there's organizational and leadership buy-in for doing DEI work, I think it's really important to capture an organization's position and stand on diversity, equity, and inclusion in a written statement. And I think that's where a DEI charter or statement comes in. I'm sorry, this, okay. Okay, I might have to exit this. There's some technical issues. All right. So I think Sarah shared a document with you with a few questions as part of a pre-workshop exercise. We'd love to hear if you had any thoughts on like why a organization or a curling organization should have a DEI charter or statement. Would anyone like to jump in?
I can if you want.
Yep.
After I put my glasses back on here. There we go. Well, a statement will promote welcoming and inclusive face for the organization. And it speaks to the commitment of the organization as well.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great starting point, like highlighting where your organization stands and like making it welcoming for others. Yeah. Anyone else?
I also wrote that it will make it like clear and give us something like specific to follow, like in our actions and what we do. Right.
I think it's important to have that like that clear vision and like a scope of what you want to do, right? Setting out a clear scope.
Yeah, it seems to me that you can't really move forward in this process unless you do this step first. How can you move towards something if you don't actually know what it is and you haven't defined it?
Something that can always be referenced.
Right. Daryl, any thoughts?
I was struggle with the whole project, not the idea, but with the whole project, thinking about I'm so far from a club environment already now that trying to relate that to a club, whereas when I think about the World Curling Federation and our 66, I guess, member associations now, I don't see us this as being an issue insofar as diversity, but certainly inclusion certainly could be part of that. But as I said, I just wrapping my head around how this relates to us. If I was back in the curling club, it would be a lot closer to me because you're more involved with the individuals. You see a lot more people.
Right. And I think that's a great point, because I think like these statements and charters could be specific to, like if it were a club, it'll look slightly different. Like if it were a regional association, it will look different, right? And like maybe for a national association, it's about like having a statement that highlights what that curling organization values and like where it stands in terms of like all those three things: diversity, inclusion, and equity.
Yeah, I went back and I did some searching and what companies, what some of the companies are using and as some of their statements, and I just made a few notes or just copied a few, and like at Apple, we're not all the same, and that's our greatest strength. We draw on the differences in who we are, what we've experienced, and how we think, because to create products that serve everyone we believe in, including everyone. And the statements are, I thought that statement was really good. And again, it replies to something that's a much bigger picture than something that's within a specific club. But it's trying to identify exactly what that message should be is certainly the key to get this thing started. So.
And what, sorry, I missed the first meeting, so maybe this was discussed, but what's the ultimate goal of this? Is it to be able to then share this? Is it just for us, or is this to be able to be shared with MAs and curling clubs, that type of thing?
So you mean like the charters and statements?
Yeah, like what we end up creating in the end.
So I think the idea was to, like, there were a lot of people from different member associations who were part of this group. So the idea was to help them take back some ideas back to the association, so that the association or like the clubs that they're part of can come up with these charters and statements. And I think in the future, we're also going to have sessions on like how do you like publicize, like share the charters and statements within your local community or within your organization, and like what that looks like.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah, and I think after the first meeting, we also like created a charter for the group. I believe you've seen that. So yeah, so we created a charter for the group, and the idea was to then help each of the members think through how this applies to their own organization, and like maybe come up with a charter or statement for their own organization. And maybe we as a group can like give feedback and help share, help the association share that more widely, I guess. So Sarah, I think Lyosh is trying to join. I'm trying to add him, but he might be having some issues.
You could try and make me the host again, and I could try allowing him in, but I'm not sure it's going to make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I just added him. Awesome. So maybe like moving on to the next question, I guess. I think we answered some of it. Like, do you have thoughts on like who the target audience should be for like the DEI Charter Statement, and like why that specific audience?
Want me to start again?
Yeah, sure.
Well, obviously, our member associations would be a target audience for us, so that they understand I guess the statement of the board. Well, this is where Daryl and I struggle, is because we really don't have a lot to say on this, because it would be at the board level. We could offer some suggestions, but I think actually the main target audience would be prospective members, just so that they understand that the sport is welcoming, inclusive, that really there are no boundaries to our sport. At least that's how we feel. So that, you might get some countries in, and Raju, India, it's not a big ice sport country. So,
right.
What was the attraction to our ice sport? We've got African nations coming in now. What's the attraction to curling? Like, why? And hopefully it's because of the inclusivity.
I think it would be important, Scott, like for us, like existing member associations, like if you publish a document that say like, look, this is important to the World Curling Federation, that would send out a message to all of us to know that this is something that we should think about and work on and like value. So I think a statement from you would send a good signal to all of us member associations.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's just a matter of us kind of approaching the board, which we've already done, as you know, to try to get the board in place for this. And I think it's been implicit, or we felt it's implicit, that we were just, because we are globally looking for new countries to join the federation, and we never thought of it, but maybe having that statement is important now. Yeah.
Yeah, I would argue that there's also kind of an internal versus external piece to this as well. So I'm planning on writing a charter for USA Curling. That charter is, the first part of that charter is going to be used internally within the staff, the board members, and all the volunteers that serve on committees within USA Curling. But then there's also the external piece that you guys are talking about that goes outward to member organizations, member clubs, and provides a statement for that external piece. So I think people often forget the internal piece, that it's important to be aligned internally first. And then there's the outward facing piece as well.
I agree, Monica. I think when it comes to charters, most external people probably don't see the charters. Like Daryl read out Apple's, and I would never have known that was Apple's charter if he hadn't before.
Awesome. Any other thoughts on like target audience and like both internal or external? So yeah, so I guess now like we've that we've discussed like the why and the who, maybe the next important thing is like, what is that message that we are trying to communicate through the DEI Charter and Statement, right? Any thoughts on those? Scott, you want to go first?
Sure. I wrote down that curling is a sport for all that transcends borders, race, sex, gender identity, ability, and age. Again, for those of us who have been in the sport forever, we always used to say it's for somebody who's 8 to 80 or 9 to 90 or whatever it is, for age, and that there's never really been any, we're one of the few sports where the gender equity, I think, is almost, again, implicit. It happens in our sport, and we've been a role model for others. So that's what I wrote down.
Great. Anyone else?
Okay, I can go. Like, I wrote mine in Swedish, so I'm trying to translate it now so that it makes sense.
It's Swinglish now.
I think it's going to be Swinglish for you guys. No, I think, as I wrote, also like externally, internally, like externally, like to actually say that we welcome everyone. That's important. And also like more internally, that we are dedicated into doing this work.
And I think for USA curling, one of the most important things for us to talk about is our stance on racial justice because of the politics and all the events that are happening in our country. So I think clearly stating our position on racial justice is one of the most important things that we can say. And then obviously all the pieces that we're going to work on both internally and externally to kind of remedy that.
So I guess what I'm hearing is like defining what inclusion means and like what that ideal state once we have done the DEI work is, right? So I think where we are and like what we value and where we want to go.
I think the one thing that's important that you as a group should know, just because of, I think Daryl and I and possibly Chad have experienced it, maybe Raju, the IOC is very, very much in pushing for gender equity in every aspect of sport. Mm-hmm. So be it from athlete to administration. So that's something that, you know, as a member federation of the IOC, that we have to be aware of in almost all decisions that we make. So and, you know, I guess passing that down to our member associations and saying you should be doing the same is a good thing.
Yeah.
Has the IOC provided any kind of statement about that on their web? I haven't looked if it's on their website or anything.
Yeah, there's quite a bit on their website, and I've actually been a part of some workshops over the last couple of months on gender equity, and we're looking at Sarah knows about this one, but we just did a survey of umpires and coaches throughout the sport that have worked for the World Curling Federation or at one of our events to look at gender equity. And now we're going to look at that. We're going to pass that on to our member associations to see if they want to do the same amongst themselves, gather all that information and see what we can do to try to maybe bring the yardsticks a little bit closer together.
Yeah, I think like IOC has also said like it's going to be an important part of the sport program, right? So future sports, like because I'm also involved with like ultimate frisbee, where like mixed ultimate is a big thing, and like ultimate frisbee is trying to push it like to be included in the the Olympic program. So I think there has been a big push in like promoting mixed gender sports, especially mixed ultimate. So
I think I just saw something for Paris 2024 that they're reducing the number of athletes, but they're expecting that it's going to be completely 50-50 in numbers of men and women that'll be participating in those games. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. And the next Olympics, actually, I can tell you that our umpiring crew is 50-50. Yeah, that's Ava. You can thank her next time.
So that's something we haven't actually mentioned here, is that it might be important for when you're writing a charter to consider your stakeholders, like the organizations that you want to align with, such as the IoT. And for USA Curling, it might make sense to make sure that we're aligned with what the WCF has as well.
Well, and the US OPC too.
Right.
Yeah.
Hi, Leosh, are you finally with us?
Yes. Hi, guys. Sorry, I had serious technical difficulties, but finally I could manage.
So, so we were just going through the pre-workshop exercise, Leosh, just talking about like what Sarah had sent, and like if you had had time to think through some of those questions, and like happy to hear if you had any thoughts and ideas on like why you think like an organization should have a DEI charter, and who the target audience should be, and what the message should be.
So sorry again for the technical difficulties. I did it in the homework. So the Qatari society is very diverse. Actually, it's 90% migrant workers in the country. And the inclusion part is really special here. I think we can be a good example to start with this one here in the Middle East. Plus, it is just an important part for us in the curling to be a leader in this kind of initiation or welcoming everybody in our great sport. And I never really worked on this so far. Just brought our general welcoming policies, but to create a structure, create some guidelines for everybody, that will be really useful for the organization in the long run.
No, that's great.
I hope you can hear me.
Yeah. That's
So plus with that one, what we can learn from this whole initiation, we can educate the future players and all the federation members as well.
got it. So like just out of curiosity, like do you have like regional associations under the Qatar Federation?
No. We are the only organization working with curling. Basically, it's a small group, like 50, 60 people at the moment altogether. But maybe like 20 nationalities.
Yeah. That's awesome. So I guess that brings us to our first breakout group exercise, which I hope will be fun. So I guess for the first exercise, what I'd like us to do is maybe get into breakout groups and think about like 6 to 10 identity descriptors about you, maybe an anonymous teammate or clubmate, and someone in your community or your region who you typically don't see in a curling club or organization. So these identity descriptors could be like a demographic characteristic, a personality trait, a role someone plays in their daily lives, or any label that captures some aspects of a person's identity. So for example, if I were to like talk about identity descriptors for myself, maybe I would say like an Indian immigrant, cisgender male, and maybe an introvert. And if I think about like an anonymous clubmate, identity descriptors for an anonymous clubmate. It would be maybe say Caucasian, a cisgender female, a mother, and an extrovert, and like someone in the community here, at least in the US, that we typically don't see in our curling club or in the organization, say an African American transgender female. Right? So just some examples. Again, this is a safe space. Feel free to share whatever you want to, but like only what you're comfortable sharing. And like once maybe in the breakout groups, you've identified certain descriptors, it'll be good to like maybe find commonalities, maybe categorize them into different groups. And once you've done that, maybe come up with a definition for like what diversity means for you, and like most specifically what diversity means for maybe your organization and the kind of identity descriptors you see among people who play the sport, or people in your community or region who maybe don't play the sport. So I guess I'll break us up into so let me put us in. I'm gonna create 3 breakout rooms, or maybe let's just do 2. So there's more discussion. Did that work?
Not yet.
Oh.
If it doesn't work necessarily, I don't mind. Oh,
Oh,
there you go. Never
okay.
mind.
I attended a Scottish curling workshop, coaches thing a couple of months ago or so. So it wasn't bad actually. It was,
Yeah, they're kind of
works.
fun.
It's better than doing nothing.
Yes. Hey, Raju.
Hey, looks like Chad dropped out, so I thought I'd join your group.
Cool.
Perfect.
Yeah, Chad had to leave early. So the exercise, so describing myself, some of the things that I thought of were cisgender, female, white, heterosexual, athlete, introvert. Yeah, I don't know. What about you, Daryl?
Dinosaur.
Oh.
So this is really really interesting. I actually I have a daughter works for NGOs, and she lives in Uganda, and she's really involved with all of this as part of her NGO field. So I actually sent her an invitation yesterday to ask her to join in this, because she would have done a bunch of work related to this, but I know she's also doing some courses right now, so she wouldn't be able to participate, because then she could have been my voice in this. But because honestly, this is all of this stuff is new. I'm kind of been skating along in the world, oblivious, watching what's going on. Your comments about the racial issues that have been going on in the US, and even cisgender. What is that? Sorry.
Raju, do you want to explain? Because it's
Sure.
relatively new to me as well.
So it's essentially like, so there's like, I guess, 2 things, right? One is gender and gender identity. So some people like identify with a gender that is different than what was assigned to them at birth. So
Yeah.
like it's very binary at birth, right? So you get assigned these genders,
Yes.
but there are people who might have a different identity, gender identity, than what was assigned to them at birth. So someone who identifies with the same gender that was assigned to them at birth is cisgender, and like if it's different, it's transgender. So that's the difference. Yeah.
Okay.
So when I say cisgender male, like I identify with the same gender as I was assigned to at birth.
Okay. Gotcha.
I was also researching this the other day, that there's so many words to describe gender now beyond just male and female. As you've probably seen people including pronouns with their names now, like she, hers, her. There's all kinds of options you can use just to fully describe the whole spectrum, I think. So it's really interesting, and I'm really appreciative to you, Daryl, for being open to like learning new things about this. And you mentioned that your daughter might be more comfortable with this stuff, but I do think it's important as well for everybody in the community to kind of talk about this stuff and become more comfortable with it. So I appreciate you being here and being open to it.
Well, especially in the curling world. So I go back to, I did a business of curling in San Francisco at the Bay Area Club a couple of years ago. And so even as we were sitting in the room and talking about people introducing themselves and their partners and that's, we're not familiar with any of that in the curling world, certainly in the curling clubs in Western Canada. I mean, it's even if they are, they're not disclosing that they're different. I mean, we're seeing now, and I don't mean different as a derogatory term, but I mean, so we're seeing it now more in the schools, and our kids and my granddaughter, and they're more familiar with all this. But I mean, in the curling world itself, it really is an education thing, considering the demographics of our group, how to make sure that they're aware of what's going on and how we get this information out to them so that they're even considering, you know, who am I? Well, I know that I'm a 65-year-old man. I mean, if I was to describe myself, and so, I mean, thinking about it in different terms is
yeah, and it's important to know what's out there so that we can be more inclusive to bringing people into the sport too, right? If we don't know what's out there, then how can we really welcome everyone?
We're talking about right now, just maximizing the value group that I've been working on is actually talking about conducting a survey, and like, I mean, the discussion has gone forward today, I'm thinking about, we need to be including, you know, not just people of different languages from different countries, but all of this conversation that we're having now, making sure that when we're writing the survey questions, that we're able to include and be inclusive. So it's, I've made some notes of that as we're going forward with it. So interesting.
And just to continue with the exercise, I think we probably would find that a lot of curlers and curling clubs that we frequent are very similar to yourself, Daryl, your identity, and also my own in terms of race and gender. And so it's interesting because thinking about a teammate, my teammates are exactly kind of the same identifiers as I am. And then thinking of people outside of the curling community, that's where the whole kind of spectrum comes into play. And there's just so many other options that are not being reflected in our curling club. So it's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and even all the people, you know, all the people that I've curled with, the people that we've come across at curling camps now, as I mean, that's where I'm seeing individuals, having more contact with individuals. It's they're all pretty much of one mold, or at least that's all you're seeing or talking about anyways.
Cool. Did you have anything to add, Raju, or are we good to go back?
Maybe I'll give you guys a minute or two, and then I'll jump onto the other group, and then we can reconvene. Maybe
Okay.
if you guys can talk about like maybe what diversity, how you define diversity.
Okay, sounds good. See you in a bit.
See everyone like represented, but also
There's
that
Raju.
everyone. Hello, Raju.
Hey.
Also that everyone feels comfortable to take up space if they want to. Do you understand what I mean?
they're welcomed.
Yeah, or if it's like, I want to be on the board, like that should feel as like easy for me as for anyone. Like,
Yeah.
Like to have the same sort of access to power or whatever you want to call it. Rashu, did you try and describe me as your anonymous clubmate?
No, but was that close or accurate?
I just added like 2 words and that was done.
Okay. Are you guys almost done with the discussion?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
So maybe reconvene in like maybe, you guys have more stuff to discuss, or should we like?
I think if you want, then you can bring us all back to
Okay.
the main room. If you want, I think we want to get a move on.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's already 7:45. Yeah.
Hey, it's the same people.
Supplies.
Oh, Leos, is that your son?
Hello.
That's some serious PPE.
Awesome.
Where
Is everyone back? Yep. Awesome. So I guess, I hope you guys had a good discussion on diversity. I guess we'll jump right back into another breakout group and maybe like cap this. I think we're running late. So I'm sure like some of you or all of you have seen this or a version of this image where it basically tries to like differentiate between what equality and what equity is. So you have like 3 people of different heights trying to watch or enjoy baseball, and then there's a fence that's blocking their view. So I guess what I'd like us to do is like maybe again go back into breakout groups and try and define what equity means and like how it's different from equality. Okay, so I'm gonna.
Yeah, I've seen a different. I've never seen one where the boxes were as tall as they were for the one. That was the first time I've ever seen it like that. I've seen 3 different pictures, but not that one.
Yeah, same. Yeah. I find all this stuff very difficult to like distinguish between in terms like the language it's important to define it properly, and the images help a lot. Like I've seen one with a tree, and the tree is bent one way, and then there's one person on one side of the tree, one person on the other side of the tree, and they're both reaching for the apples. But then obviously the person on the side where the tree is bent has more access or easier access to the resources than the other person. And so it just kind of shows like with equality, like there's resources to both that are the same, but that doesn't necessarily help the person on the side of the tree that is bent. And equity does a bit more, I think, to provide the appropriate resources depending on a person's particular situation. So it's more tailored and appropriate. And then I've even seen a graphic about justice that's interesting too, where it actually changes the tree. Like the tree is straightened, so the structural integrity of the tree has to change in order to like truly have equal access to both sides. So I don't know, I think the graphics are really interesting and helpful. But in terms of defining equity, what are your thoughts on like the key pieces of that? Because we actually, when we were naming this group, we wanted to include diversity and inclusion, obviously, as words that were part of the initiative. But then at first, we actually had equality by accident. And then we switched it to equity. And the reason for that was like the difference between the two words. So we just felt that equity was more of a tailored approach to providing resources that is more effective than just simply applying the same resources for everyone, because it recognizes that people have different circumstances or different situations that, and there's not like a one size fits all kind of approach that works in the space, I think. So now we are the Global Initiative for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and our logo reflects that. So.
I think you made a good point, and in particular, and I always relate, and I guess I relate this to how we are in the curling world, and we always talk about rules, and we're always trying to make the game as fair and equal as possible. But there's even at that, there's so much different with finances for teams and countries, and access to facilities and all of that. So trying to make this fair and as equitable as possible for everybody is always a challenge, and we certainly don't. We're not necessarily able to do that very well with the actual game itself. But certainly when we talk about people and that, we can do a better job of that for sure. Yeah,
that reminds me of something that I was speaking to TJ from the Nigerian Curling Federation about. He was talking about how his curlers really need access to a curling facility, and that they would be willing to travel to Canada to get that access. But they were asking for that curling club access kind of free of charge because the cost was so high for them to get there in the first place. Whereas I think like a Canadian team looking for curling club access would have an easier time paying for the curling facility. So it's just like the same resource, but different resources, different access for different teams. And so what he needs is completely different from what a Canadian team would need, just based on like where they're from and everything like that. So it's just interesting to think about, like, normally we would make people coming into our curling clubs pay for access, but this Nigerian curling team has such high boundaries to entry in the first place that maybe we could consider tailoring the resources a little bit so that it's easier in that way, at least when they're already experiencing such difficulty getting there in the first place. So just interesting.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, because I think in terms of access and like just some people, I guess, based on backgrounds and like where they are, have more, in a sense, more privilege than others, right? So I guess in that picture, like the height in a way represents some sort of privilege. And it's about like us as administrators and like thinking about like how we can help people with like less privilege enjoy the sport that we all love. And,
yeah, and it's not so much about just providing resources across the board, but really being intentional and thinking about how that would affect different populations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Awesome. So I'm going to jump to the other breakout room, and maybe we can rejoin in 1 minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And I backtracked and I said, well, maybe you can't, sorry. I didn't know. So I felt bad about that.
Yeah, we shouldn't actually. That's an interesting thing. We shouldn't. We just have a different kind of approach or attitude to things, but we shouldn't be ashamed of that.
Yeah.
Or feel sorry for that. It's just their decision to enjoy that thing, what we do, or not totally reject it, but at least try it out, experience it, and they can decide it later. Do they enjoy it or not? But don't reject it just because they have a different history or background or society or religion or whatever it is. I'm trying to to plan this in the whole organization. Don't reject everything just because it was rejected like 20 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever. Just try it out and decide it. Mm-hmm. Unless it is illegal or you know, there is a certain boundary.
Hello, Raju.
It's gone. Just wanted to see if you guys are ready to jump back into the main group.
Sure.
Yep.
Hello.
Oh, we're back. Okay.
All right. So I think our third exercise for the day, last breakout group, or maybe if you guys are okay, maybe we can just discuss this in the main group, and then because I think we're running short of time. So I guess for the next exercise, what I wanted us to do was like think about all the ways where people might feel excluded in curling or other walks of life, and like think about like what that exclusion looks like, and based on that, try and define what inclusion means for us, or would mean for us, for our organizations.
I have a really good personal example for this, I think. So I attended a diversity panel that another curling club was running in the US, and I noticed that actually somebody that I curled with in juniors was on the panel, and he's from Chile originally. And he talked about our curling club, my home curling club, Broomstones, and he shared that his junior curling experience was very different from mine. There's a bunch of curlers that have come out of my club, the Dropkins, Alex Leichter, myself, and he felt that his kind of situation was completely different, and he was questioning if it had something to do with race. He also thought that it might have been because his parents didn't curl too. Curling tends to be kind of inherited between generations, I think. So oftentimes when people's parents curl, it's a lot easier for them to get into curling. And he didn't have that kind of link. And so he kind of was questioning in this panel if those factors made it a lot harder for him to be successful in competitive curling and have access to the same resources that I had. So I found that to be very heartbreaking, to be honest. And I'm working with him a lot now to see if we can get him some of those resources that he hasn't had before. But I think it's just an example of how he felt excluded in curling, and very unintentionally, but just something to think about moving forward, I think.
I was just going back to some notes I made. Coaches of Canada just had their symposium back at the beginning of November, and it was all about diversity and inclusion. And one of the panelists was talking about language as one of the main ones, how you have to feel comfortable going into an environment where people speak your language. And the one that I wrote down, which was I took to heart, was it's difficult to create a program for a group of people if you're not from that group. So, you know, as a Caucasian middle-aged man, it's difficult for me to understand the needs and wants of somebody that comes from a different walk of life. And so how do we engage those people to let us know what they need? And I think that's the biggest thing. We have to understand what they need in order for them to be included in the sport.
That's a really, really good point.
So I guess one example that I have, or like maybe this is just a pet peeve, is like I play in a bunch of bonspiels in the US, and like sometimes with the Indian team, and like you'd have like the American anthem played, and then for some reason you'd also have the Canadian anthem, national anthem played, but like no other national anthems played. So even though there might be people from other countries, it just I guess makes you feel kind of excluded, where like yeah.
I have just one common thing when kids are coming to our practices and want to join and try out, and we have three conditions to get involved with the Qatar Curling Federation. Should be a citizen, or the mother is Qatari, or born in Qatar. And many of them doesn't match none of the criteria. And the sadness on their face, and I mainly can't do anything to let them try or do anything at the moment until I don't build a curling rink here. But that's a common thing when I see the expression on the faces of exclusion. Also, what Scott said, it just hit me first time as a young Caucasian man. I never felt myself excluded, and then I've seen it many times, and I'm trying to do something against it, but personal experience is many times different.
Sarah or Daryl, do you have any thoughts?
I have like a situation that I had a few weeks ago that's like, it sort of seems small, but like, but I think it just adds on, like adding like focus onto someone being different. Like we did an outreach program with floor curling, and I had a mom come with 3 kids who like were very different from all of the other kids that were curling. And I saw them then in the curling rink. So they had like gotten their nose to say, I can try curling for free. And they came to the rink, and I was really happy that they came. So I wanted to go and say, oh, great to see you here. And are you having fun? And the mom was introducing me then to her kids and saying their names. So she said the first name, and I said his name and like, hello. And then she said the name of the third kid, and I had no chance repeating his name. Like I had never heard it before, and it was too difficult for me to say the name. And the mom sort of started laughing because I guess in Sweden she comes across this all the time. She was prepared that I wouldn't be able to say it. But then, I asked her again, and I learned. But still, even though like she was smiling, I asked, I made an effort, but the focus still becomes like, you are different from the rest of us. Like, do you understand what I mean? Like, and I don't know how like that's going to happen again. And I can't learn all of the names in the world to make sure it doesn't. But just like you want to create that sort of environment where everyone can walk in the door and sort of without friction, or what is the word? Where like
Friction,
it's
yeah.
focusing on you are not like the rest of us.
Friction.
Friction. That's something that I've been thinking about since that happened.
But I guess
I
the
think
thing.
we see it.
Sorry, Darren.
We'll see this when we're in our when we're doing our curling clinics in our curling clubs, fitness levels and abilities. Very quickly, particularly if we're talking about competitive versus social, and how easily the people that maybe aren't as skilled or aren't as fit are forgotten about as we're as they're coming into the club and showing their skills, and when groups are defining themselves, if they want to be more competitive or if they want to be more social. So that would be one area, I guess, in curling. And then of course then it's persons with disabilities as well is another group where we don't do a very good job at the curling club level, and not a lot of them anyways, of accepting those or making it more acceptable for them to come and participate.
Right. So I guess, yeah, I mean, we've discussed like the different ways where people might feel excluded, right? So I guess, would anyone like to volunteer a definition for inclusion like based on what we've discussed, or what inclusion would look like or should look like.
Come on,
I would go back to the charter statement that I wrote down earlier, that the sports for all and transcends borders, race, sex, gender identity, ability, and age. You know, I truly think our sport is inclusive. It's sometimes making sure that message is out there to people to understand it. And we can all do more to be more welcoming, but I see the roots forming worldwide right now of how this is going to happen, and we just need to nurture it. I hope I'm just not being overly optimistic.
No, not at all.
Okay.
That's why we're here. We're optimistic about it too.
That's right. Yeah.
How would you define it, Raju?
No, I think so. I would talk about like I think what makes our sport great and is it's friendly. It's like people are welcoming, at least based on my experiences, right? But like we want to institutionalize that. Like we want to have all organizations, clubs, like highlight and cherish the differences between within like the community, and make people feel welcome despite those differences. And I think so yeah, for me inclusion would be like cherishing the differences among the members and among the different people, and like making people welcome despite those differences.
I'd like to add, I do think that curling is very inclusive. Just the fact that we all sit around a table after games and talk, and it brings people together that normally wouldn't interact. I think that's a great part of our sport. But I would argue that we need to go further with this. Our sport is often organized around curling clubs, and the nature of a club itself is not inclusive. It's actually exclusive. So while we think that we're open and welcoming to everybody, the actual structure of our sport may not be as much as we think. So I would push us to even go further with this.
And some of these things
I agree 100%. Sorry.
No, I was going to say like the barriers or the biases might not be explicit, but like there are these implicit barriers and implicit biases, right? So I think for us as a group and like as a community, we need to be addressing those implicit barriers and implicit biases.
I think Daryl would probably agree that the word club is something that should be banned. He talks about his business of curling. As soon as you do say club, you're right. It's all of a sudden you have to join. Yeah. You have to be a part of. Where the reality is that we all just curl at a place. It's cold inside and it's warm when you have a beer.
I'll have to talk to you more about that, Daryl. Do you think we should wrap up since we're out of time?
Yeah, I just realized we are like 6 minutes over. Yeah, awesome. This was really great. I hope you guys had the discussions were informative and like hopefully made you think about various aspects, and like I guess maybe we can schedule a part 2 where we talk about like the next steps. I think we discussed like why our organization should have like a charter and a statement, like who the target audience is and like what the important message is. And like we've also, I guess, tried to define what diversity, equity, and inclusion means. And like I think based on our discussions, we've identified that like maybe these definitions will vary based on like what organization you're part of and like what your focus is, right? So I guess maybe we can wrap it up here, and then maybe in the next session pick it up and like talk about actually putting together a charter or statement, like the different aspects or the different elements that go into a charter or a statement.
Good.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks,
so
Raju.
much.
Yep. Thanks everyone. Hope you have
See
a
you
great
next
rest
time.
of the week. Yep. Bye.
Here's everyone.